to this. All right. All right. Welcome back, whoever was here the first time around, and got a couple of new additions. I guess you guys who are here for the first time want to introduce yourselves. I don't know who you know or don't know. But most of this group just kind of met each other for the first time last time, so we're all still kind of getting to know each other. Anyone want to jump in? And
I can go.
yeah.
My name is Alice. For those of you who weren't here last time, I have met Josh just years ago, sort of through the music circle in Knoxville. I am in upper Northeast Tennessee now, lived in Nashville for a long time until COVID. My background is in hospitality development, so I have a lot of experience in the hotel industry, high level hotels, things like that, large projects. I'm now a clinical therapist. So that's what I'm currently doing. And am just interested in options for potentially business, but also potentially safe zones. So that's why I'm here. We've been talking with Josh about this for a while. So I'm excited that we're actually meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go next if that's fine. Michael, me and Josh and I were roommates way back in the early 90s in Lake Placid, where I grew up, and he would visit. And we managed to kind of keep in touch. I've been particularly interested in one of Josh's other projects, and we often talk about the things that are just going on and kind of trying to recognize, trying to, I guess, put in perspective this idea of like what do we do if things are more complicated? And I just think it's worth walking through that. So I'm here for that. And again, this kind of concept of mutual aid. And I also have some information from our last meeting about Discord servers, which I can bring up. I'll just chat about it later. But if that's something we decide to use, it looks like it could be a very useful option for us.
Cool. I can go next, I guess. I am Rudder Wells. I watched, I've known Josh for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And watched, I'd reached out to him not long ago, apologizing for not making the first meeting and saying I wanted to stay in the loop. And he said, "You want to stay in the loop? Watch the first meeting." And I did. And I was watching it yelling, "Try Discord. Discord would be great." Watching a recorded video, and somebody said, I was like, "Oh, I wish I could reply to this. I wish I could reply to that."
Yeah.
And I was glad to point it out. Josh was like, if you're, this is not going from us chatting to boom, it's a thing. This is the conversation about the possibility and all the possibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So, so happy to be here. I guess listening to the introductions from the first meeting, I guess the things that are pertinent that I could share. I lived in a commune when I was a teenager for 3 or 4 years, so I know a little bit about what it's like to live in and amongst anywhere between 11 and 20 people in a house and grow food out back. I was a teenager, so I was more kicking up my heels than I was really messing with the garden. But 11 years at Burning Man, so I know a little bit about dealing with challenging climates and circumstances and situations. And just happy to be here and get involved in the conversation. So nice to you guys. I'm still trying to I want to see everybody on my screen, and this is a different screen than I'm used to, so I don't know.
You're not seeing everybody?
No, I'm seeing, I've got speaker views and
If you go up to the very top, you should see sign in, a green check mark, recording, view, and a grid. If you click that view, if you go to gallery, you should be able to see everything.
yeah, that's usually what I do, and I'm not seeing any of that info.
I just found it myself because I agree it seems to be in a different spot than what I'm used to as well. But
And my name is not Mandate Circle. I've been involved in and started and hosted and ran men's groups off and on for the last 15 or 20 years. So I don't know how to change that to Rucker, but yeah, this seems different than the last time I zoomed. Lots changed. Anyway, it'll be good.
Oh, wow.
I would like to welcome Mandate Circle because he's actually my dad.
Ah,
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Rucker and I met, gosh, what's it been, 10 or 11 years ago, outside of Preservation
At
Pub.
least.
And I may or may not have been flying high, fine as wine, having myself a big and rich time. And he talked me down and therefore became my surrogate father. And, so, yeah, he imprinted on me. Good to see you, Rucker.
Yeah, great to see you, man. Great to see you too.
when you help somebody walk off a ledge, it's you kind of stick with them for a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just so you guys know, we do have a 5-year-old who's in the midst of trying to watch some cartoons, so I'll mute myself now at this point.
Gil, you want to say hello?
Hey everybody, I'm the new guy. So I live in Knoxville. I guess I met Josh about probably 15 years ago, back when he owned the parlor, and we used to talk about instruments and play music together. I'm from Cookville, moved to Knoxville in 2003. I used to be a petroleum geologist and then transitioned into a luthier full time. I just realized that this month makes the 10th year I've been practicing lutherie as a full-time occupation, and love to travel. I guess I'm expat curious, kicking around the idea of maybe going on a sabbatical, possibly retiring early. So I'm really curious about, getting together with you guys and discussing it. And I have lots of questions for Josh when we get started with everything. So nice to meet everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll have answers for you. I think, one thing that has become clear to me as I've seen how people have responded to this conversation, this topic in general, is that a lot of people form quick ideas in their mind about what this is or isn't, and decide that it's either for them or it's not for them. And I think that that's unfortunate, because this, in my mind, there is nothing clear about what this conversation could potentially lead to. Like, for example, I had some feedback along the lines of, I get the idea, I'm down with the idea, but I'm not able to entertain the idea of relocating to South America for various reasons. I've gotten that response from a bunch of people. Or I'm not comfortable necessarily throwing my lot in with a bunch of people who I barely know, investing potentially alongside them, which is completely understandable. But we talked last time that this is not necessarily about, forming a physical community in Peru. This is about having a conversation on the subject of lifeboats generally and what that could potentially mean under a whole variety of different challenging circumstances that might or might not ever come to pass. The lifeboat theme is one that I didn't invent that idea. That idea, I kept hearing it in a whole bunch of different contexts, and it really struck me as something that I think is just sort of floating around in the collective consciousness, that there are a lot of people very worried about a whole bunch of different things, whether you're worried about, war, whether you're worried about climate emergency, whether you're worried about, Trump tanking the world economy, whether you're worried about civil unrest, um, and what might represent a lifeboat in any one or or group of those potential scenarios could be completely different. So while it's true that what I had in my mind when I started thinking about this for my own purposes and to address my own concerns was a piece of property, probably in a rural location in Peru where food self-sufficiency might be feasible, where a good water source, um, you know, could be secured. That was kind of where I was thinking uh, at first, but the more that I've talked to people about this, the less clear I am in my own mind about what form this might take. So, Gil, I'm open to hearing any questions you might have. But there are no answers and there are no roadmaps for what we're talking about. We're in a kind of uncharted territory, I think, in so many different ways right about now that it's kind of maybe the blind leading the blind, or people just each of us might have some insight or creative ideas about how to live under the present circumstances, that might coalesce into something specific, where we all get on one page and one project and throw our lots together, or it could be something like just a network of people who are sharing um, and tapping each other's brains, for ideas and support. So yeah, just I would say try not to form any clear idea of what this is at this point, because as far as I'm concerned, there is no clear idea.
Well, I have a
That was one
question.
of the things I,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, just to say that was one of the things I loved about the first meeting, was, and and an idea started to kind of develop, and like, hold on, yeah, yeah. Anyway, I just enjoyed the openness of the gig. Oh, hush, go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess my thoughts are like, so Peru is near, one of the top of my list of places that I would consider moving to, if the shit hit the fan, or really just even if the shit didn't hit the fan. And I'm just curious, I've heard, Josh, that it's the living expenses are pretty low there. Like, it's a pretty cheap place to live. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. Maybe give me an idea of what it costs to live, like monthly numbers for rent and food and all the basic living expenses. And then I have another question too. Also, like, how do you get money there? Like, how does it work to get money from a U.S. account into account in another country or Peru, basically?
Well, I'll answer the second question first because that's a simpler question. I use a service called Zoom, XOOM, which is a PayPal company, and I transfer US dollars directly from my US bank account to my Peruvian bank account. And it's quite inexpensive. I think the charge is about $8 for up to $10,000 transfer. And then the changing money here is an issue. You don't ever want to change money at a bank because the banks all offer horrible exchange rates. So I always withdraw dollars from I have a US dollar account and I have a Peruvian soles account. So I withdraw the dollars that I transfer from my US bank account. I go to they're called Casa de Cambio, which is an money exchange business, and I convert the money and then I deposit the soles into my Peruvian currency bank account. So it ends up not being a terribly expensive. You don't lose a whole lot in that process.
Are you saying you actually get physical cash like US dollars and then take that and convert it to the local currency?
That's what I do because I could just transfer it within my bank, but they would give me a horrible exchange rate.
Right.
Um, so it's not ideal to be walking around with a whole bunch of cash.
The gangsta wad.
Yeah, but I feel comfortable. I do it during the day. I do it in a busy business district in Lima where the bank is a block away from the place where I exchange the money. So I don't feel like I'm running any significant risks. That being said, my ex-wife was robbed, in broad daylight. So I don't want to paint an unrealistically rosy picture of how things are here. Um, we are, in fact, I think at the moment under a state of emergency because there's been a lot of petty crime, theft. There's not a lot of violent crime, but there is a lot of stealing of people's cell phones, holding up people with a gun it happens not infrequently. So, there's no place that I'm aware of that is without its risks. So it's a question at this point of finding where you think those risks are most manageable. Regarding cost of living, that depends a lot on where and what kind of lifestyle you want to live. There are 3 or 4 very upscale districts in Lima where the rich American and European tourists tend to come. And if you want to rent a nice a nice apartment in those districts, you could get something for maybe starting at $700 a month. But again, the those are the nicer districts.
Like that's cheaper than anything at all you can get in Knoxville. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
think you can rent anything for $700 in Knoxville anymore.
right. And if you want to step outside of, the sort of expat bubble, those districts that where the expats tend to go, it can be quite a bit less than that. You could rent a place for probably 400 a month, if you went to a more everyday neighborhood. I pay about 620 for a modest sized two-bedroom apartment. I'm not in the expat bubble area that I referred to, but I'm not far from it. I actually prefer, I lived in that expat bubble for the first 4 years. So, and I kind of got sick of it and wanted a more, I wanted to live somewhere where one of the problems with being in one of those neighborhoods is that you're kind of always a target for people who are trying to sell something or see you as a rich foreigner. So where I live now, nobody bothers me. Nobody comes up to me on the street, trying to sell me stuff. Let's see, food is quite a bit cheaper. I'm trying to think, uh, I would say maybe half of what you're used to. Sometimes some things even less. Um, you can go out. You can there's a bunch of restaurants that do what's called a menu. A menu is basically what would you would call a prefix menu in the United States, where you can pick pick a starter, you can pick a main course, you get a drink or something, and those can be extremely cheap and they're quite good. You can get a full, three-course lunch for $4. Um, but that's only part of the picture. There are other things that are more expensive here. For example, uh, consumer electronics. Basically, most things that are imported are substantially more here than what you're used to. So you don't want to buy an iPhone here. You don't want to buy a computer here because they'll probably be 30-40% more than what you pay in the States.
Well, as of this week,
Right.
who knows?
Yeah.
Can I just add something though? So just Josh is really honestly not, I think, not capable of speaking about the food properly. The quality of the food is fantastic, and the diversity of the food is amazing, and the seafood is like it's a north, it's a cold current, so you could just diverse, fantastic, fresh seafood. Josh, I just want to point that out. It was like everything was delicious and remarkably affordable. But even like these little places he's talking about, were really fantastic. Yeah. Anyways, that's all.
Yeah, Mike visited about a year ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
The Peruvians are very proud of their food. They consider Peru to be a food mecca, and I would agree with that. So you would eat well here and compared to what you're used to. Like chicken in the States is awful. I mean, and here everywhere you go has really good chicken, and it can be very, very inexpensive. Um,
Josh, I just want to interrupt you real quick. The fried chicken in Atlanta is fucking incredible. I don't know what you're talking about.
okay, yeah, Atlanta fried chicken accepted. Um, yeah, any other questions about Peru specifically?
So what's the healthcare like there?
Good question. Yeah. Um, I just got a new health insurance plan, and I'm paying 150 a month, $150 a month. And that would be considered a blue ribbon type policy. Um, with a policy like that, you're rarely going to be out of pocket more than $30 at most for anything routine. I've not had any like major health issues since I've been here, so I don't know what it would be like, if you got well, no, actually even cancer. I know I have quite good cancer coverage with this policy.
What was it like dealing like with the birth of Molly? I'm sure that was, you know,
Yeah, it was maybe we didn't have insurance. And so if you pay out of pocket, it's still very reasonable. I think just just rough ballpark, I would say maybe we spent $1,000 all in.
wow.
Yeah, without insurance.
What?
So for so and the level of care. I mean, because I know a guy, Vinny, that'll do root canals really cheap, but is the level of care commensurate to?
I can
Well, I
tell.
don't want to say to the U.S. because I don't even know what the fuck. Yeah, but
Right, that's a good point. It's not like the US is head and shoulders above other countries. Um, as
yeah,
far as I can tell, it's as good as anything I've experienced in the US, and it's also like it's just a completely different experience. Like there's a human being who I can get in touch with 24/7 who is my point of contact with my health insurance company, and I could talk to her, at within the hour if I needed to. I could, on a number of occasions, not well for myself and also for my daughter. We've had like health providers come here to the home, and it's dirt cheap. It's like less than $40 to get an in-home visit from a doctor. Um, I don't think that happens in the United States as far as I remember.
And I just want to add to that. When I lived in Honduras the first time back in 2014, I had a near-death experience, and this little tiny clinic that on the island legitimately saved my life, and the level of care was excellent. And that was in Honduras, which is much less developed than a place like Lima. And I spent $50. They legitimately gave me life-saving care. So just to speak to that, it's like, for example, my wife, when we had our son, she was considered a geriatric pregnancy at 39 years old, right? And the United States has the highest mortality rate of a developed country for females giving birth. Um, I think that along with a lot of the other problems that we have with the United States, I think healthcare is more on the care side as opposed to the whatever it is here, right? Like it sounds like when you pay for your insurance, you are actually paying for healthcare. Like it supplements your otherwise out of pocket expenses, but also gives you the ability to communicate with, like you said, a provider that's going to work for you instead of try to not pay, right? That's very attractive. That's just my own personal experience, not in Peru, but within a much lower developed Latin American country, I guess.
Yeah, I've never heard of anybody being bankrupted by health problems. And probably all of you know people who have been in the States.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something that I think it goes back to this idea that one of the things that I liked about our conversation before, and just to tie into this, like quick stories, we were in India with we brought one of our kids' friends with us, and he had mono, brought it from the United States to India, so he got really sick, and we had a person pull up within like 2 hours with an X-ray machine, do an X-ray at our apartment, and it was $50. They sent a digital copy of the X-ray to us, which we then sent to a family doctor, emailed them, and they were like, "Oh yeah," and it just, in a world without our system, like this just functions more like services. I would imagine it's a little harder, like an emergency care, if you need an ambulance or something, but in the end, if you have good overall health care, your odds of needing those things kind of gets limited too. But I guess what I just in saying that, there was this conversation I was listening to the other day that Josh is familiar with, and in the US we really break apart services and disconnect things, and it kind of makes us less resilient. And you look at some of these other places around the world, and while they have their own issues, like the core care seems to be better. We really don't have great outcomes. We are good at, open heart surgery and, like emergency services, but we're not good at the day-to-day care stuff in America. And so I think it's one of those things if anybody ever considers doing something like that, just think it's a different way of approaching healthcare. And I think in Americans, we kind of don't have anything like that at all. It's just such an automated, it's just a horrible experience. So I just wanted to add that. But I think there's a certain sort of like natural order to that kind of services and goods transactions. Somebody is a doctor, they come to your house and you pay them like they might have done here 100 years ago. So anyways, I'll leave it there.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Josh. When you were first opening this meeting, you were kind of touching on, this doesn't have to be it's all ideas right now, right? And we're trying to figure out what. We're involved in a secular homeschool group here in our little town just south of Atlanta. And my wife, Kristen, met a woman today who is kind of doing the homesteader thing, right? So she's obviously pretty hippy dippy, but she's involved in something pretty similar to this, that is a resource sharing. So maybe they're not like trying to buy a plot of land and have an intentional community necessarily, but I kind of would like for her, if you're okay with that, to just kind of like things that you talked about, like, okay, sharing resources, what does that mean? Obviously it's a group of women, so like OBG stuff that are safe, the contact information, things of that nature.
Like we're talking about the potential of what this group could be. And one of the moms in my homeschool group has a group already in place that are having very similar discussions to what we're doing, of like, okay, everybody's kind of concerned about the state of things, various things, and what all the possibilities for people who are worried about it and what we could do. But they're meeting on the 19th, so I'm going to check that out and kind of see what models they're using and maybe bring that back here too.
Yeah, in the sense that like it doesn't have to be black and white, right? Like there could be a subsect of this group that says, let's do it, in the next year and a half. Let's buy property, whatever. But there could also be a part of this group that's like, they don't necessarily not have to be involved, but we can still share resources. We can still share information and still try to help each other in whatever way. Her and I were having this conversation earlier this afternoon. I was like, I'd like for you, we should talk about that a little bit. And to your point, like, I don't want to scare people off to be like, honestly, man, I'm a line cook. There's no way I'm moving to Peru, right? Not me personally, but like I know that there are people in that like financial situation. I mean, I can't move to Peru tomorrow. That's not going to happen. But I want to know all of the options. And I think that this group could be something to do with that, right? Like, I don't think I'd like to encourage those people to not just give up on this conversation. Does that make sense? I guess.
It's fortuitous that you mention schooling, because that has been very much on my mind in relation to this conversation. And I don't think I mentioned it yet. I've got a 3-year-old kid, and thinking about her education is one of my most important concerns. I've got her in a school that I like, but through the process of looking for where to put her, the idea of creating my own school or working with other people who have similar thoughts about educating their children is something that's been on my mind a lot. And I don't know if it is a separate conversation from this one or if it's a part of this conversation. Since we're not, we haven't yet drawn any clear lines about what is and what is not part of this conversation, might as well throw it in the hopper. Along with that is another question which has come up in some one-on-one conversations I've had with people about this subject, which is how could I support myself if I, picked up and moved to Peru? That's a tough question. The most obvious answer for any of us is teaching English. As native English speakers, that is a highly valued thing here. I did that for a few years when I first got here. I had no experience before teaching English. I kind of just learned on the job. So the idea of creating something that might be both an English institute and also a school for my kid and for anybody else's kid, Colby and Kristen. Unfortunately, Jason didn't make it here today, but he's got a youngin' too. Maybe all of these things fit together somehow. Maybe the idea of a hostel, of a music venue, of a school. I could sort of see some some general outlines of how that could all cohere into something pretty cool.
And I do want to say that I brought that up because the conversation came from the homeschool group, but
Right.
the group that she's specifically talking about is kind of doing the same thing. And just, I think anybody that's interested in kind of figuring out a way out of this quagmire that's going on right now, shouldn't be excluded on their own like thought that like, well, I can't do the ultimate goal, whatever that is, whatever they have in their mind. I just I you know, I used to be an evangelical. I don't like giving up on people, you know.
I put some thought into this structure piece a little bit, if I could jump in. I kind of wonder if maybe the idea of if when we talk about the Discord thing, if we have a repository, I mean, one of the things that I really find interesting is that everybody has an idea in their mind of what this is. And when we had this last meeting, the word lifeboat to me is a perfect word because you're on a ship in your normal life and you're sailing along to a destination, and all of us, those are different things. And then you come across this storm. So we're all in this storm. And a lifeboat is not a solution in and of itself. It's a transitional thing. It's a way to get to safety from something that was not safe anymore. And so I wonder, like, I imagine if we all thought about a lifeboat in ourselves, it's different. And so I kind of feel like the point you're making and Josh has made and many others have made is that it shouldn't be about, I think like, if you're talking about like a nuclear disaster or climate issues or things like that, the southern hemisphere is most probably a safer part of the world in general. Like if you talk to climate science or if there's ever a nuclear exchange, it's, I know it sounds dumb, but like the most extreme example of our lifeboat thing, you kind of want to be somewhere where the air is, there may not be clouds in the sky for the entire year, that sort of thing. But in a sense, if we were to create like a server or use Reddit or the Discord server or whatever, if people wanted to just contribute ideas completely unique, they could be wacky, they could be odd, they could be unique, they could be really serious, they could be whatever. But maybe if we all just kind of let ourselves free flow with that, because I do think that the mutual aid piece is important. When you look at how quickly things are changing every day, you have to seriously, like, well, what if I need help, who can I go talk to? And like, hey, if somebody needs help with X, I can help out or provide advice or guidance or that sort of stuff. And so, maybe it's somebody's come up with if there's an issue with communications, here's a way we could all communicate. Everyone get a homing pigeon. I'm kidding, but just come up with something that's novel to yourself or that's interesting where you have passion for it, and just do it. Who cares if other people like it or not? And we just kind of keep a repository of these ideas and let people work it out in their heads. And then when ideas seem to resonate, we go from there. I can't hear you.
The idea, because there's so many different potential dimensions to what we might be talking about that, and some of them might apply to you and some of them might not. And so just in the interest of using your own time and attention efficiently, this kind of conversation is going to be limited in what can be accomplished. So I think, having a conversation about how to have the conversation is a really key part at this point in my mind. And in fact, I would say that is the only thing that matters right now for me, because this conversation could very easily fizzle out after one or two more get-togethers. We're like, all right, that was a cool idea. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Other things come up and take my attention away from it, and it comes to nothing. Or we could, really put some thought into how to create the right conditions and format to have the right kind of conversations, and then maybe it generates some momentum. Maybe it brings in some other people, like, connecting up with another group like Colby and Kristen are talking about, just I've experienced in my own life in the past few years positive snowballing of conversations, just where you start talking with one or a few people about something interesting and important, and something completely unexpected comes out of the blue because one of those people knew someone else, or someone shared a video or an article or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden kind of miraculous things start happening. So so I'd like to really, I don't think we made much progress in the last month in terms of figuring out how to have an ongoing conversation. But I'd like, to hear ideas about how to do that.
Well, I was just gonna ask, like, I think the best course of action would be like to delegate and assign. I grew up in the Baptist church, y'all forgive me, but like I'm a big fan of committees, right? I mean, obviously we are 6 people, but like we could figure this out in a way that like what needs to happen, who needs to take care of it, right? Because if we're going to talk about some sort of semblance of a community, we all have to take a little bit of a responsibility, right? So it can't just be Josh organized this, and while I appreciate that, he's got a lot of stuff going on as well, but maybe we could all do a little bit and we could figure out like what needs to happen and who needs to be in charge of making that happen, who would volunteer to make that happen.
Are we even there yet?
No, I mean, as far as communicating, like obviously, Josh, you tried with Reddit. That was not conducive to what we were trying to do. I don't know what the progress is with Discord, but I'm into those things. It's just, I don't want to put the onus on Josh or on Michael. They seem to be kind of the ones, and obviously Alice for even hosting this meeting, the onus on any one person to do everything. Like, we're talking about an intentional kind of lifeboat community, right? So like we're willing to help in any way. Sometimes I just kind of need to be told what to do. Does that make sense? And I'm happy
Are you trying to volunteer?
Yeah, I'm trying to volunteer. I don't know how. I want to help in any way that I can, and I think that might have gotten lost in the last meeting a little bit, like who's going to take care of what. Like we had a lot of great ideas, but there was not really like let's look at this, let's look at this. But honestly, Josh, I feel like the onus completely fell on you, and I don't necessarily feel like that's fair. I know everybody threw in suggestions, but I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of my thought that's coming out, but I feel like communication is the most important thing we need. We need a way to communicate. We need a place to have this library of our discussions, so to speak, like a resource for people to look back on. We're happy to help in any way that we can, but I'm not that creative. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, I guess, if that makes sense. Unless I disagree.
I have a quick question and comment on. Yeah, I like what you're coming to, brother. I have a little bit of. I'm not a tech guy at all, and the big Burning Man camp that I was with for years and years and years went to Discord, and you had the LA group and the San Francisco group and the Canada group and the Berlin group and all these, you had the green team and the build team and the front of house and the et cetera, et cetera. So Discord seems like custom made for what I heard being discussed at the last meeting. If that Discord were going to be set up, I mean, is there an email thread or a text thread going on with these people, last meeting, this meeting, so that once that Discord gets set up, hey, here's the link to the Discord, I guess, some way to communicate between now and the next time. So.
Yeah, I'll just say that I'd be happy to set up the Discord. I was just gonna kind of let everyone know that all of the features that we want are completely available and there's no cost to it. So it would most probably be an optimal situation. My oldest is very heavily into Discord and took the time to just show me all the functionality. So I can just set one up if everyone's okay with that. Just it won't take long. I can just do it. It's not any skin off my back. And then we'll have a repository, a place to start. But I have to say that, at the end, I was going to ask Josh tonight, for example, as like a sort of an example for tonight is like, I found myself today, well, not just today, but the past few days, trying to understand what's happening right now with our economy. And I don't mean to put a lot of pressure on Josh, but I was just going to say, when you look at this situation, what are things that because he has background in that, like, what are some things you would do when you see this type of volatility for average people? Like I was talking with a client today and they're like, we just bought like 4 cases of toilet paper because we saw what that was. And they were just joking, but these are wealthy people. They're kind of hoarding products because they were like, prices could go up for everything really fast. And we were joking about it and it reminded me to bring it up today because even if we're talking about this idea of helping each other, if things get kind of funky, are there things we could do practically, just wise choices we can make, even just in the next week or two or in the next month? That Josh, if you have any recommendations for people I know you're not paying attention to the hellscape up here, but I was curious if you might have some thoughts you could share, or some advice that might be useful or prudent.
The short answer is no, but I'll give you a longer answer. As I think most of you know, I have a background long time ago in the financial industry. And what I took from that experience is the conclusion that I cannot make any sense of it. And I don't think anyone else can either. So I have not made an investment in a traditional financial instrument in probably 20 years. I have had more people than I can count ask me the question you just asked. What do I do in this crazy world if I've got, if I've got a little nest egg, how should I position it? And I always say the same thing. I am not going to tell you buy a stock, buy a bond, buy a T-bill, buy gold. The only consistent advice that I give people to that in answering that question is invest in yourself. Invest in something that you can cultivate and make money with. Gil, you invested in yourself. You found something that you loved to do, that you wanted to learn more about, that you needed to accumulate a shit ton of, equipment in order to accomplish, and you became, a high level professional at a very specialized, line of work. That's the kind of investing in yourself that I would advise anybody to do to make your situation more robust under whatever circumstances might come our way. And I will bring that kind of back to, this is maybe me pushing my agenda, but the idea of us collaborating on an English language institute strikes me as a really good idea, because it's something that every single one of us would already have valuable skills, which could be monetized. And it's something that you don't have to be physically present in order to start doing. and it sets in motion um, the establishment of something that could become, uh, a livelihood for people who are looking to make a huge transition in their lives. Um, Other than teaching English, I wouldn't know what any of us could do to stay afloat financially here in Peru. But I can tell you for sure that every single one of us could stay afloat financially by teaching English. Um, and I know people who have run businesses essentially, they're essentially brokers for English teachers. They do some advertising, they find students, they connect their roster of teachers up with those students, and they take a cut of the revenue generated. That's the kind of thing that we could do with very little investment, without anybody having to pick up stakes and move, um, and would be potentially laying the groundwork for something more down the line.
So in order to teach English in a Spanish speaking country, you have to know Spanish, right?
No, you don't.
Okay.
Uh,
I
what-
okay, because that's always been my question. I'm like, wait, how do I teach English if I don't speak Spanish? Like,
um, there are a lot of people who do it. Basically, there's a large market for Peruvians who just want to have a conversation with a native English speaker. It doesn't even need to be like formal instruction. Um, just they're happy to pay uh, for 1-2 hours a week to just have that as part of their weekly routine. Um, and some actually will go for a lot more than that. I've seen people looking for, they want 3 hours of English conversation 3 days a week. Like they want to really get intensive about it. Um, and I don't know if you all know this, but Lima is a huge city. It's got a population of 10 and a half or 11 million people. That's bigger than New York City. That's bigger than the biggest city in the United States. So I think that the magnitude of the market here is so big. Um, and we are, as native English speakers, are kind of a hot commodity. So if we put our heads together about how to package and market that, I think we could quite likely make inroads in that market.
Certainly sounds like a business you could grow if you did have people in the space, right? Like even if it was a physical location, um, you know, what's just for my edification, like I understand what it costs me to run a month in the area, but like what's the real return? Because like I've known plenty of people that have done um ASL or English as a second language, ESL, sorry, in other countries. And it was fine while they were there, right? But obviously, as far as an American wage, it was not something that was going to keep them clothed and housed. But from what I'm hearing is like, is that a possibility? Like, even let's forego a school, right? Let's just say if Colby and Kristen and Wildman moved down to Peru, like what kind of workload are we looking at versus return on investment to teach English as a second language? is my question. Because I've known people that have done it in Korea, in South Korea. I've known people that have done it in multiple places in the world, and it's like a great entry way, just like you, Josh, to get into a space and like familiarize yourself with folks. But they always ended up coming back because it was just to sustain them for the time that they were there, essentially, whether it was like 3 to 6 months. But I am curious because I think first I would like to know like what's the return on that time investment, and obviously I believe that to be a situation where it could open doors for other revenue opportunities, whatever they may be. I'm just curious if you could shed some light on that.
It's what you just said. It's not good by a US standard, but it's pretty good by a local standard. So, to give you a more specific answer, probably talking about $10 to $15 an hour is what you typically get paid here for teaching.
USD.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That beats
Obviously,
working at
that's
Taco Bell.
not good if you're living in Knoxville or living in New York City, but if you're living in Lima, that affords you a pretty reasonable lifestyle.
What are the qualifications, like pre-qualifications for teaching there? Is it literally just being a native speaker?
Yes. I was incredulous too, but I found that that multiple existing reputable companies were willing to put me right in almost immediately with no training just because I was a native English speaker. And it was quite uncomfortable, to be honest, the first couple of times because I had no fucking idea what I was doing. And I felt like I was, wasting these people's time and money. But then I realized quite quickly that that's just not the case. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be the right teacher to hire for somebody who is looking to learn what a past participle is for the purpose of taking the TOEFL or some standardized English exam. I'm not cut out for that, but I am cut out for a whole lot of what a whole lot of people are looking for, which is just, like I said, to just have a conversation with a native English speaker. And I quite quickly I found that I got good at it because what I realized was there's a lot of value to just going into a situation with an individual and figuring out what they need because it's different for every single person. The first English teaching job that I got was at an institute. It was called Wall Street English, and they had like 80 or 90 pre-formatted lesson plans, and you had to just go by the book, go through the list of exercises and whatever the fuck it was. That, in my mind, was not good bang for the buck for the students because it didn't necessarily have anything to do with what they needed as individuals. So I did that for like a month or two. And then I transitioned to working for these agencies, which would hook me up with private clients. And then I would go to the office of a lawyer, or I would go to the home of a college student, or I would go to a mining company and talk to an executive there. And in every case, I would just say, tell me about what you do and tell me what you're looking to learn. And then I would do some legwork and find a law article for the lawyer, find an article about mining for the person working at the mining company. And and pretty quickly made myself, kind of even better than the average of what they're used to getting. So in a pretty short amount of time, I think each one of you could feel like you're not faking it, like you are actually providing real value, and um, and in the process building financial, stability for yourself in a foreign land.
I actually used an app last summer where I paid like some 19-year-old dude to chat with me in Spanish. And he would correct my Spanish. He would like type it on side so I could read it. But literally, we would chat about what I was making for dinner and what I did that day, just in Spanish for $11.
And by the way, she's basically fluent. I'm get me to the next bus stop and a couple of beers, But to that notion,
That's cool.
when we lived in Honduras, I would have local people come up to me who spoke a little bit of English and just beg us just to practice. Right. So like there's a huge desire for it, because the ultimate goal for a lot of people who are interested is they want to get to Miami, right? Like that's their mecca. That's what they want to do. And they want to just chat, and they want to know, like when I took Spanish in high school and I failed twice and have since spent 2 years of my life in Latin America, like I only learned what I learned through conversation with native speakers in a survival landscape where they will not speak English to me and I had to figure it out. And that's what the Spanish I know is. I understand the desperation for it because obviously it's the global language for the most part. I love this because I love the idea that, yeah, start small, right? Maybe you do some onlines with some people webinar. Maybe you move to Lima and we start a school, a multilingual school
I can
that
teach kindergarten already. I got that unlocked.
like I do love that idea because it wouldn't necessarily have to follow the individual over the course of a greater space of time. If that's a conversation, again, going back to what we're talking about, if that's a conversation that we're really trying to have. I do have one question, Josh. How much can I buy like a quality motorcycle for?
Well, I mean, they have really small, like rarely see a motorcycle with more than 150 cc's here.
Fine, I don't want anything like a Harley or nothing. Yeah, no.
For something like that, $700.
Great. That's about what it was for us. Because I rode my dirt bike a mile to the dock to get on a dive boat. So like that's about what I spent and was able to sell it when I left. And that's ideal, right? So
Yeah, I had one of those. I got rid of it when my daughter was born. I decided I didn't want to orphan my child.
well, you just put them in the baby carrier in front of you. That's what we did.
I guess then,
Granted, I wasn't in
That's
Lima.
a joke.
I wasn't in Lima, but yeah, sorry.
um, if we could, let's talk a little bit about the other school aspect, the teaching our own kids and potentially other people's kids. This is a subject that I'm deeply, deeply interested in. So, my daughter is 3, and her Spanish is way ahead of her English. Her mother's whole family, they don't speak any English. So she's, learning Spanish as a native, and her only exposure to English is me and video visits with friends and family, and it's not enough. So I was talking to my parents about this last year, and they very generously offered to pay to put Molly into an all English school. Um, and there are some very high-end, expensive English language schools here, which I actually have become friends with a bunch of people who teach in those schools. Um, the thing is, they are exclusively for the very well-to-do stratum of Peruvian society. And Molly's mother, even in spite of the very generous offer from my parents, she was like, I don't think we want to put our kid in that environment, because there's, the saying, keeping up with the Joneses goes 10 times here. Uh, class identity and looking down or looking up at people who are higher or lower than you socioeconomically is a very big deal here. And so even though the money was available to send my kid to that kind of a school, we ultimately decided that was not where we wanted our kid to be. So then I sort of just stumbled upon this other school, it's called the British International School, and it's obviously connected with an institute of, an educational institute based in England, but it is staffed entirely with Peruvians, um, who are not native level speakers generally. Um, it's a lot less expensive, though, than those fancy high-end schools, and the kinds of people who go there are a much more representative cross-section of society. You know, they're not all rich. And I think it's a much more healthy environment for Molly. So I'm happy with it. But what I realized is that I think there is an opening in the market for for something in between those two. Not something that costs like, so the high end schools, um, they cost about $20,000 up front to get your 3-year-old into. Um, Obviously that weeds out, 95% of the population here. And so you get, the Kardashians of Lima, going to those schools. And, and on the other end of the spectrum is the normal Spanish language instruction, where they all teach English, but nobody really learns to speak English well. So I think that there's space in the middle there for, me, you guys, Colby and Kristen, who have your kid and are interested in getting involved with teaching your own kid and maybe teaching other people's kids. Where if it was sort of a mix of some native English speakers and some locals, um, to create a cost structure that doesn't require us to charge $20,000 to get your 3-year-old enrolled. Um, you guys are muted.
Sorry,
What are they learning for $20,000 at 3?
that they're better than everybody else.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly it.
I love that, because that sounds like you could probably get a decent facility at a rate that isn't outlandish, and you know, you're not you're not only like providing for yourself, but you're offering like a real service to people that are hungry for it, that can't otherwise afford it, and bringing some of that, like, you know, good loving socialism kind of thing to the people that really really need it. And like how warm that makes me feel, just the thought of it, like city kids, I can teach them outdoor skills in English or whatever it might be, I love that notion. And you don't have to have kids to be involved, right? Because we're going to need, you would want people that can do a multitude of things. That's beautiful. That might even be that might be a more lucrative option than buying a property that only caters to the occasional group that comes in that wants to have a sales seminar or a whatever it might be. That's a constant, right? That's every semester a new generation of people that you could grow ultimately without furthering an investment in more property even. It's I really love that. Okay. We've already decided we'll see
We're gonna go pack
by March
right
by March of next year.
Just to continue the brainstorming, I think that this all could potentially fit together with what we talked about last time, which was the idea of some combination of a hospitality slash music themed business. So imagine a hostel slash music venue where people know it as a destination for music. One of the shocking things about Lima is that the music scene here sucks. Like there's nothing. I mean, well, there's not nothing. There's the crap Latin pop, which a lot of people like, but there's nothing that any of us would want to listen to. But I feel like there's a potential market for it because it's such a big city. You don't have to appeal to a large percentage to find a pretty good niche business. So I think if you combined the hostel with a music themed venue plus, and you kind of link it up with this school slash English institute, I think all of these things could cohere into something really unique and potentially quite viable as a business. You're muted, Colby, but you look like you're talking.
You didn't need to hear what I was saying. I was ultimately agreeing with you. I'm thinking teacher by day, bar wench by night. Like I love this really hard. And not everybody has to be a part of every little thing, right? Like there could be latitudes.
And it's an ambitious, multifaceted vision, but you can kind of take it in chunks, right? Like the English Institute is probably the easiest thing to get off the ground, and just sort of get the ball rolling. And then you can just sort of start adding on to that first brick.
I just wanted to pipe in that I think that that sounds like a very cool idea in the sense that anything that's sort of modular and can kind of fill in and is dynamic. But I do want to clarify with the schooling, was that 20,000 soles or 20,000 USD for those schools?
USD.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because that's basically like, that is comparable to those prep kids schools here in the US where they pay 80 grand, basically like 60 to 80 grand for elementary school kids here, like the same posh type thing. I mean, it's just,
Sounds like we only need 6 kids.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's
what was the price of, so 20K was the Casa de Kardashian. What was the I don't know the word for school, but I probably do, but so 20 grand for the uppity school. What was the lower end, or what was the you mentioned a different one.
Where I send my kid to, which is more expensive than just a standard Catholic school, but nowhere near those fancy schools. Um, the initial entry fee was $2,500, and the monthly tuition is, let me quickly convert. Let's see. $360 a month.
Right. Okay. Yeah. In my brain, I was thinking, well, let's see, 20 grand. So if you could, trying to find the sweet spot, and, and the money end of it, is it, $500 a month. And then of course I immediately go to sliding scale, which is always a great idea. It rarely works as well as the idea is great. Um, but I do love the idea of having a scale, and maybe it's just income based, or whatever, but just having it in a way where people that can afford more can pay a little more.
Yeah.
Just kind of how I
That's
want
a thing.
everything to fucking be, but
That's a thing
it's not
here,
a
Drew,
crazy
believe it or not.
concept.
Universities do not charge the same tuition to all students. The tuition is different depending on their family's financial circumstances, what secondary school they came out of. So yeah, I agree that it should be that way. In my dream scenario, that's how I would want my school to work, where the parents who can afford to pay more, so that the parents who cannot afford to can pay less.
I have a question outside of true native speakers versus Lima born Peruvian English speakers. What are the facility differences like compared to that, what you're in that middle tier between ho hum and Kardashian, like what's the facility difference like? Is it astronaut? Because I've been in some nice places in Latin America and I'm like, and then I've been in some really crappy places in Latin America. I'm like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, is it to charge that middle ratio? Is it something that's got to be like, so does that make sense? So much better than just below, I guess. Is there a big gap there?
What are the facilities like where my daughter goes?
What's the difference between the facilities like where your daughter goes, the traditional Catholic places or the Kardashian places, like outside of just the staff and their ability to actually really give them the native tongue, the programs, the facilities, whatever, because we can't just teach them English also, I guess. I don't know. Or can you? I don't know how that works in Peru. Like when you enroll in school in the States, it's
No, I'm envisioning a real school, not just an English institute.
gotcha.
So
So
we're
Um,
in the
that begs the question, like, yeah, what is like overall, you know, does that make sense? Like,
well, where my kid goes is a very nice, comfortable, not ostentatious facility. Um, it's got it you it would you would recognize it as a school with classrooms like what you're used to. I've actually never been to any of the super high end schools here, but I know they've got, fancy large campuses. I imagine that they're, um, quite first world, like oases that have no no resemblance to the world right outside their doors.
What sort of size facility? I know this is kind of an odd question, but I kind of that in researching the cost of things down there as far as structures. What are you talking, like a couple thousand square feet for classes, or like would you think you'd start? I think I just think it's a very interesting idea. But would you just start with a smaller grade section and keep it simple and then kind of just feel it out? I would assume would be the wise path. And I'm just spitballing, 100% just thinking out loud.
I mean, it depends on who's involved and what resources are available. I've thought about the idea of just, you know, with my own resources and perhaps with some help from my family, just trying to buy a building that I could live upstairs and have, the ground floor available for the first iteration of this idea. And it might be something that you would grow out of in a few years, but that would enable, the first, if the first year you've got 8 students, you could accomplish that in quite a small space, and then you grow as needed.
Yeah, because when you said this just now, basically you're spending like 5,000 US. And I was just kind of doing the math in my head. That's most probably like between like 15 and like 20 something thousand soles. And the research I was doing is like pretty much that's middle class incomes are like three, 2,000 to 4,000 a month. And so when you think about education, everyone I know outside the States, like they allocate a pretty big amount of resources to their kids' education. So I just realized like that's a totally makes all sense in my mind. Like even that's the school year, I can see that that's most probably a relatively common. It seems like that's most probably for kind of middle class folks of the type of money they would spend on school in general. And that so you could do it affordably, provide something of real value that could be really, and like you said, you just do the math. If you keep it very simple, you could do, that's a very cool idea, Josh. That's a neat idea. I know Arunima would love to teach math or physics. Just don't ask about biology.
Would you start like with an age group and then allow yourself to grow with that group, as opposed to having like K through what we would consider K through 12, just like maybe start with your third grade group, and then as they developed, you brought in more people younger than them.
That's what the school that my daughter goes to has done. They've been around for about 10 years. And they started, I think with just a few, maybe nursery school, kindergarten, first grade, or something like that. And as their kids, progressed and got older, then they added additional grades. So I think maybe this year for the first time they just started adding like what we would call high school, 10 years in. So that would be the model that would make sense to me, is to find a a few other folks who've got kids around the same age as my kid and start with just that. Start with 3, 4, and 5 year olds, um, and let the thing grow organically.
Let me ask you this: outside of obviously American speakers being the educators, you have to have other staff. I would prefer, if we could, to if this works out, obviously, like to pay a little bit better than whatever the minimum wage is, what is that barrier like? What's payroll like in Peru? Do you have any insight on that? Like, you have to have some sort of janitorial service, you have to have whatever the things are. I'm curious.
Well, I'll give you a couple of data points. Minimum wage here is, hang on a second, let me just do the math. Minimum wage here is, I would guess, about $380 a month. And it's not uncommon for regular working folk to make not a whole lot more than that. My ex-wife was a human resources manager at a department store. So she has, friends who used to work there, selling cosmetics or electronics or whatever in a department store. And I think, maybe they made, let's see, maybe they made 500, 600 a month. So I would just guess that, the teacher's assistants at my daughter's school are probably not making a whole lot more than that, maybe 600 or 700 a month. That's just a wild guess. I would like to talk with the administration of this school, if I get, serious about this idea. I'd have to introduce the subject the right way so that they don't think that I'm trying to come in and steal their business. But they seem like nice, open folks who would be willing to have that conversation. There's a whole bunch of different people whose brains I want to pick down here. I've got a meeting actually scheduled for Friday morning. I do a bi-weekly Irish music session with an Irish fiddler who I became friendly with here, and we do it at one of Lima's only Irish bars, and the owner of that is an actual, Irish fellow who's settled down here permanently. And I want to sit down and have a conversation with him about what it's like to run a business in Lima, because it might be a fucking nightmare. Like, one thing that I noticed, and I used to actually document this by taking pictures, before the pandemic, I would walk around and I would see all sorts of businesses that had these, they had been stickered. They put a big sticker on the front door saying business closed for the following reason. They broke some rules. They didn't, fulfill some requirement. And it struck me as really concerning in terms of the prospect of trying to start and run a business in this environment, because it seems like it might be the case that the government is just, trying to suck the blood of any business that does well, by systematically screwing with them and basically shaking them down. So this guy will be able to educate me on that kind of thing. There's a whole lot of education that I need to do for myself and for anybody else who is interested in exploring this. It's a daunting prospect. Most of I ran a business in the States, and I did not do very well with it. And I told myself I was never going to do that again. I hated it. It was a miserable experience, uh, and I didn't think that I would ever seriously consider trying that again. But this is something different, you know. This is about my kid. This is about a world that is a lot different than it was 15 years ago when I started the parlor. Um, so so I am willing to seriously consider doing it again, but I would because of all the mistakes I made the first time around, I think I would be much better equipped to ask the right questions before just jumping in the deep end like I did with the parlor.
I think that's imperative. I would like to say that I'm really glad that you took the risk to open the parlor because it opened up my availability for a lot of people that I care and love about now. So thanks for your sacrifice, Josh.
I'll send you a GoFundMe link so you can.
Yeah, I honestly probably owe you some money if we're being honest.
But you know that sometimes things don't go well, but you learn from them, and that's I think it's just a super important. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sometimes something that's not successful can still have a lot of benefits. You know, and learning from it. For example, Josh, in Peru, you can take a risk with less capital. You know, and that could open the door to being flexible enough to make something work, which is really hard to do here. Genuinely, really hard to do here. I can speak to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea of the school. That's all I have to say.
Well, we've been going at this for an hour and 40 minutes already. It's getting maybe a little bit late. So let's circle back to the Discord idea and what the next steps are for continuing this conversation.
Everyone just put your email in the chat and I will send you an invite to the Discord server. I set it up already. Once it's set up, we can, in the next conversation, discuss a topic or two, on it, and everyone can then obviously access and do whatever they want, really.
I also have some information from the immigration lawyer that I spoke with that I wanted to share. So I was thinking maybe I could just pop it in the chat. I can copy and paste it. That way everybody has a copy of it if they want it. But I had an opportunity to talk with an immigration lawyer for free, which was rare. But someone that had actually lived in Peru and was able to give me some information about options available. There's four, I believe. There is a digital nomad visa that is in the works. It hasn't actually, the process for that hasn't begun yet, but they expect it to sort of any time. There's the tourist visa. There's an investor visa that requires $150,000 investment. So that's kind of the what they call the golden tickets kind of way into the country. And then there's a retirement visa. So those were the four options that she told me about. And I just wanted, for those of you that were interested in that information, wanted to pass that along because we didn't have to pay for it. So that's great. It's at least a place to start. So
that's awesome. Please put that in.
There's also a work visa, which I don't know the details on how what you have to do to get a work visa. But if we were to start a business entity in Peru, then that would give us potentially the ability to sponsor some of the participants for a work visa. There would certainly be, some additional costs involved, but that would be another potential path.
Josh, you have residency at this point?
Yeah, I'm a permanent resident. I have not decided to pursue citizenship, although I might do that at some point. There's not a whole lot of reason to get citizenship once you've already got permanent residency, but yeah, I've got permanent residency based on the fact that my child is a Peruvian citizen.
Right. I know we have several friends who have residency in Honduras. And it's like, I don't know if it's yearly or if it's every 5 years, they have to go through a process. And I don't want to take up any more time, but I'd like to talk to you about that more in detail at some point because
Yeah, that sounds like a great
Well,
topic.
this is good Discord stuff because this is the kind of stuff that we're going to want to talk about and that we're going to want to have, in a form that other people who come along next month or next year and have the same questions can easily reference.
I did want to also mention that I do work with adults as a clinical therapist, but I also, for the last few years, have worked in children and youth therapy in the school system. And so integrative education models is sort of a special interest of mine. So that's something that down the road could be beneficial potentially.
Awesome. Seems like there's a lot of synchronicity between all of us and what we know about, what we've done in our lives, what we could potentially bring to the table. So that's encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
So Mike, you'll send out invites to the Discord server. We recorded this meeting, so I'm going to post it on YouTube and I'm going to send it out to, the folks who were not able to join us tonight. And should we try to do it again in a month's time? And
Yep.
I think you have to keep the conversation going. The Discord's great, but I think face to face, whoever can make it, right? It's not a make or break. I think it's vital if we want to keep this conversation going.
cool. Yeah. So around the beginning of May, I'll ping everyone and find a time that works, and hopefully Alice can set up the Zoom meeting again.
Yeah, and I think your point about not everyone can make these things, it shouldn't really matter. If we have a repository and a place, people can jump in and jump out, and I'm enjoying this conversation totally. So thanks everybody.
Yeah, guys, I feel so inspired right now because I've had a really shit last 2 weeks, and I'm not saying I'm moving to Peru tomorrow, but I want to thank you guys for giving me a space to kind of spout some baloney a little bit too. And Josh, thank you for putting this together. Gil, it's really nice to meet you. Paul,
Nice to meet you,
I'm so
yeah.
happy to see you. Alice, thank you for hosting. Michael, I'm gonna lean on you for all that tech stuff.
Word.
You're the man.
Got it. Very technical stuff. No, I set it up while we were chatting.
I know.
Yeah, no, not really a big deal. It will all be fine. We will survive. 100%. Well, it was great to see you all again, and nice to meet you, Gil, and nice to meet you, Rucker.
You too, Mike.
Guys.
Absolutely.
Pleasure hanging out with all you guys. Looking forward to doing it again.
All right. Good
Cool.
night. Take care.
Take care, y'all.
Good night. Bye.